Hola, Rey. Pues la última hora son las declaraciones del primer ministro israelí Benjamin Netanyahu, que ha aclarado que la guerra, que ha definido como guerra por la existencia de Israel contra Hamas, para acabar con Hamas, continuará, ha dicho Netanyahu, pese a la presión internacional y a los costes elevados que supone para Israel, en alusión a los 120 soldados israelíes muertos en la incursión en la Franja de Gaza, pero también a la muerte que tú te referías, la muerte este viernes de tres rehenes, tres israelíes que fueron secuestrados el pasado 7 de octubre, dos judíos y un musulmán beduino secuestrados por Hamas en dos kibutzim hace 71 días, cuando este viernes lograron huir de los captores, se acercaron a los soldados israelíes que estaban desplegados en el barrio de Shujaia, en la ciudad de Gaza, y pese a que iban sin camisas y, como tú decías, con una bandera blanca improvisada, fueron abatidos, recibieron disparos por error de soldados, en concreto de tres soldados. Uno de ellos pensaba que eran miembros de Hamas que intentaban engañar a los soldados, atraerlos para luego hacerles una emboscada como hace unos días. Los soldados han provocado, por tanto, una muerte, como tú decías, que Israel define de trágica, ya que no solo se equivocaron, sino que también incumplieron las normas de apertura de fuego. Este incidente ha provocado que las familias de los secuestrados aumenten la presión hacia el gobierno de Benjamin Netanyahu para que acepten un acuerdo, para que lidere una nueva mediación que lleve a cabo, por un lado, el alto el fuego, aunque sea parcial, y por otro, la liberación de los secuestrados aún en cautiverio de Hamas. Cabe destacar que Hamas ha dicho este sábado, ha reiterado que no negociará de nuevo con Israel, lo ha dicho los mediadores, hasta que Israel no cese completamente los ataques en la Franja de Gaza. Entonces, también destacar, Rey, que este fin de semana una reunión muy importante. Este viernes en Oslo se reunieron el primer ministro de Qatar, Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, con el jefe del Mossad, David Barnea, para intentar explorar una nueva vía que pueda llevar a esta pausa bélica y también una nueva ronda de liberación de presos palestinos en Israel a cambio de los rehenes en Gaza, en el cautiverio de Hamas. Mientras tanto, en el campo bélico continúan los ataques israelíes en la Franja de Gaza, tanto en el norte, en el centro como en el sur. El patriarcado latino Jerusalén ha denunciado que 2 mujeres han sido disparadas y han muerto por disparos israelíes cuando está una parroquia en la ciudad de Gaza, una ciudad que en la parte este llevan a cabo intensos combates entre miles de soldados y también efectivos del brazo armado de Hamas en esa zona.
In the wake of the tragic deaths of 3 Israeli hostages killed by Israeli soldiers in northern Gaza, a large crowd gathered in downtown Tel Aviv on Saturday night in what has become known as Hostages Square to demand that the rest of the hostages in Gaza come home, demand that the Netanyahu government does more. I spoke with a number of relatives of hostages, some who have been released and some who remain in Gaza, who say that Prime Minister Netanyahu needs to be more proactive and put a plan on the table, prioritize the release of these hostages over the military operation. Here's what the cousin of one of the hostages had to tell me.
But I believe that such a tragedy that could have been prevented by a deal between Israel and Hamas, they must change things now. They must pick a different course, and I think it's possible.
We also heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu, who expressed much of what the country is now feeling, that the 3 men were so close to being free after more than 2 months in captivity. Netanyahu saying that we were so close to embracing them, but we cannot turn back time. He again argued that it is the military operation that led to the initial wave of hostages who were freed, and it is the military pressure that will help get more hostages released. But I spoke with the daughter of a hostage who was released several weeks ago, who said that in light of what happened on Friday with the killing of those 3 hostages, they are now afraid for the lives of those who remain in Gaza.
They heard all the bombing, and they were very, very frightened that the bombing will be falling on them, that they will die from the army missiles.
The shelling.
Yeah, and they were they told us they didn't believe that the army really knew where they are, because they were shooting very, very close, and they heard all the loud noises of that bombing. And I really think that we should do anything to stop the war.
The IDF is taking full responsibility for the deaths of these 3 Israeli hostages, all men in their mid to late 20s. They say that the hostages did everything right to prove that they weren't militants and that the soldiers violated the rules of engagement. At the same time, the IDF is saying that this is a very chaotic, tense situation with lots of terrorists trying to attack IDF troops wearing civilian clothing. The 3 Israeli hostages emerged from a building near the soldiers' position. They had no shirts on. They were trying to show that they didn't have explosives. They were waving a white flag. And in firing on the hostages with a white flag, that's when the troops violated the rules of engagement. 2 of the hostages were immediately killed. A third was killed later after he had run into a nearby building and was shouting in Hebrew. Their bodies were taken back to Israel, and they were confirmed to be the bodies of the hostages. Now this raises all kinds of questions about whether the IDF is being careful enough and about their rules of engagement. There have also been a number of friendly fire deaths among the Israeli troops who have been killed so far. And then, of course, the global outcry about the thousands of civilians among the Palestinian population of Gaza who have also been killed, which has led the United States to put a lot of pressure on Israel to tell them to be a lot more surgical and a lot more precise, generally, in their military operations in Gaza. Alex Marquardt, CNN, Tel Aviv.
Let me pick up with what we've heard from Jake Sullivan, saying that Israel will transition to what he called a new phase of the war, but also calling for more care, really, to avoid civilian casualties. Your reaction to what we heard, to Mr. Sullivan's comments?
I think what Mr. Sullivan is saying is not enough at all, and on the contrary, he's advocating the continuation of this terrible war for months to come. If we count the Palestinians who have been killed, including those under the rubble, you're talking about no less than 25,000 Palestinians killed and 10,000 children killed, in addition to 50,000 people injured. How many more people should die? I think the solution is not the continuation of this terrible war, which will take lives of Palestinians as well as Israelis, but to stop the war. Since the 7th of October, we've been saying that the best solution is a complete permanent ceasefire and an exchange of prisoners. Today, as you have mentioned, Israelis are shooting their own prisoners. Up till now, it's not just the last 3. 19 others were killed by the Israeli bombardment. And it is now estimated that no less than 300 of them were also killed on the 7th of October by Israeli planes. The solution is immediate and permanent ceasefire and not the continuation of this war.
Yeah, and on that last point out to our viewers that has never been verified. And we did report just now, of course, on the growing anger as well from Tel Aviv to bring the hostages home, of course, as the IDF looks to investigate, as you know, Ms. Barghouti, why its troops accidentally, their words, killed 3 Israeli hostages. Let me talk to you about the politics, because I think, and I would like to get your thoughts on this, we have seen this week growing rift between the US and Israel in what relates to this so-called day after. The US has said the Palestinian Authority should assume governance responsibilities in Gaza after the war. But Netanyahu has repeatedly rejected the idea, saying it would not happen as long as he is prime minister. What challenges, Mr. Barghouti, do you see here? How does the US thread this needle?
Well, the challenge is in Netanyahu's government. It's a very extreme government. It has fascist elements in it, like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. And Netanyahu himself is interested only in one thing, the continuation of this war forever. Because if he loses his position as prime minister, he will go to jail. This is for sure. The reality here is that what Netanyahu speaks about is reoccupation of Gaza and then finding some other country or some other structure to take care of the civilian needs of the people under his occupation, in violation, by the way, of international law. The Americans say they want to bring in the Palestinian Authority, but it has to be a different kind of authority. I don't know what kind of authority, more securitized authority, which will not work. The reality is that nobody can impose on Palestinians who should govern them. That should be the standard. Palestinians have to choose their leaders through democratic free elections, which we were deprived from since 2006. But the reoccupation of Gaza will only complicate the problem. What we need is to end the occupation, which has been there for 56 years, and not expand it into Gaza.